Welcome to Turek Books Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm your host, Joshua Turek. We're never going to read all the books we want, but when someone tells us about a book, that's its own valid form of experiencing it. Our guests come in to talk about the books that left lasting marks on them as readers, and that becomes a springboard to who they are, who I am, and maybe who all of us are. So sit back, relax, and enjoy it. And who knows, maybe you'll end up grabbing a book or two. Maybe you've read some of them, and it's nice to hear someone else talk about them. We want this to be like a book club, but without the guilt. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Turek Books. I'm so happy you're joining us again today. Chicago, November 8th and 9th, I'm doing stand-up at the Comedy Bar. Come on out. Let's have some fun. Let's talk the impending Civil War, whatever. Anyway, I'm so excited for our guest today. He's a comedian. You may have seen some of his videos raiding ditches in the Irish countryside. He has a new book out called Country Fail, and people often mistake him for me and vice versa. Killian Sundermann joining us from Ireland.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Josh. Yeah, that is exactly how I think I first came into I first came aware of your videos was mainly people commenting underneath your ones saying, "This is you, this is you." Like people very lazily writing, "This is you." So it's very good to finally be here. And I take the compliment. I take it. I'm happy with it. I remember my girlfriend looking at it and going, I mean, he's kind of hot. So I'm happy.
Likewise, yeah, there's way worse doppelgangers. I'm honored. And the fact that, you're also talented. Anytime you want to confuse me with a talented person, by all means, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's a mutually complementary type of doppelganger. So, yeah.
Let's ride with that.
Also, congratulations. I just saw you got married there. Big congratulations.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we kind of did it in a bunch of different parts, and we're winding down those parts. And yeah, I finally posted about it. I lost 600 followers and counting, which once again I take as a compliment. I'm glad to still be breaking hearts. I didn't think I had it like that. And then my friend messages me and he goes, "No, just no one wants to see a poet happy. It's not that you're hot." And I was like, "Okay, that's fair."
I'd say I'd say half, 50% are he's not authentically miserable, and then the other 50% are they wanted some of that. And
Okay.
they know they're locked out of the market.
Sorry, you had your shot and you blew it. And to the other half, I can win you back. Just ask my wife. She sees me in existential despair after 9 p.m. almost every day of the week. But
Also, to that 50%, if you're looking for someone who looks quite like Josh, you could travel, 5,000 miles to Dublin and knock on my door, and it will be answered by my very angry girlfriend who will tell you sweetly where to go.
There we go. Yeah. So don't even try it. Put your passports away unless you want trouble. Well, maybe you do want trouble. But how are you doing? How are things over in Ireland? Do you live? You're in. Are you in the Dublin area or? I mean, it doesn't.
I'm in Dublin.
Oh, okay.
I'm right by Dublin. Is kind of Dublin City is like the center of it will be between these two canals. So you have the Grand Canal, and then you've got the Royal Canal, and they're sort of that's the city is contained within them. And I'm about, I mean, maybe like a 5 minute walk from the Grand Canal, which is this beautiful bit of kind of like nature that flows through, the relatively not crazily built up Dublin. So it's really nice, especially at autumn because there's lots of trees along there, and it's where if the sun shines, which is a rare enough occasion, that's where everyone gets their beers and drinks, and there's lots of pubs dotted along it. So I'm just there, so I can cycle in for gigs and things like that. It's really handy. It's a beautiful spot.
Oh, sounds lovely.
Yeah, it's lovely. Where are you?
I live in LA. I live in particular Santa Monica. I'm by the ocean. We panic moved there during the pandemic and got a rent-controlled apartment, an old apartment.
Oh, amazing.
A lot of rich people live out there, and so there's a stigma to it. And then also living in Santa Monica, you kind of lose all your friends. I have a better chance of seeing you in Dublin than I do my friends in Echo Park, and people are just be patient, 5 more years and they're all going to move that way when they're settled down with kids. So We're not.
Hold. It's gonna happen.
Yeah, yeah, waiting for that. So we go back and forth on like, should we leave or not? Do we
Mhm.
want the ocean and nature, or do we want human companionship? And it's just pick any given day. We're back and forth. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's also it's we're lucky to be by the water and all of that. And yeah, I see you
Yeah.
got a little stack of books sort of peeking in the corner of your
I
screen.
tried to make this look nice because I'm aware like most of the time you have people in the studio with you. So I tried to like make it the I don't know, make it look good. This is on like my girlfriend's, it's like a box. It wasn't high enough. But anyway, I've got a stack of books here, and I'm actually pretty sure I'm not even going to talk about a single one of the books that is here. But I just didn't have. Yeah, I recently moved in. You see that in the background, you can see that's all the books I have because
Okay.
I my books are out, my parents out, and they live in Dublin as well. But they're heavy things to move around, so I've left them in my parents' house. I do have to collect them soon, but I have all those books. But the ones I'm going to mention, I think the only one that is a note is the Sally Rooney one. I suppose I have the Intermezzo one, the new book that she just released. Um, but yeah, I none of these ones I'm actually going to talk about. They're just nice books that I like.
Okay, those are the props.
Hmm.
Yeah, and moving is such a like books really do bear the brunt of moving, and that's how so many
Hmm.
get lost and donated and forgotten because you're just like I can't do what I need to do.
Yeah.
Books are the heaviest, and they really. I just had someone a couple days ago telling me he lost a lot of books in moves. It's sad in that way.
Yeah, well, they're just,
Fallen
I guess, like,
soldiers.
yeah, the fallen words that disappear, you know. But it's that kind of thing with when you're moving, and then it's like it's not just a book; it's a book you've probably already read, and you know you haven't read it in like 5 years, and you're probably not going to read it again. But it does bring you joy. It's like if you're doing that, what's her name, Maria Kondo method, where you pick up the thing and does it spark joy? They do a book's like holding a book that's going to spark joy. But am I going to read it again? I mean, maybe in 10
I
years. I
know.
like having it there, but
Just
you know,
like having it there. And then that reminds me of like breaking up with someone and having to like disentangle your books from one another's. I mean, I hope no one ever has to go through that, but yeah,
mm.
that's a sad one there.
I remember finding a book in my parents' house when I was younger. I must have been like 16 or 17, and I think I was reading The Hobbit, and I found this old copy of The Hobbit, and I opened it up, and it was on the inside of it was written a note, and it was from my dad's old girlfriend. He used to live in Wales for a while, and it said like, "Dear, Helmet, blah blah blah, lots of love you so much from, Suzanne, this old girl he used to go out with." And it was like I didn't even think about my parents having other partners, and I was like reading this, going like, "What the fuck is going on here?" Like, is everything okay with my parents' marriage? Like, what's going on here? But he obviously just didn't want to get rid of the book. I don't know.
Yeah, and dad was a person, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, what a story that little note told, and like it like altered your brain just coming across that.
Hmm.
Wild. Well,
Hmm. I was like,
yes.
I'm not reading, out of loyalty to my mother, I'm not reading this copy of The Hobbit. I'll find some other copy from the library.
It's a good son right there. Every mother should be
Yeah,
so
right.
lucky. Yeah. So you're a reader. You grew up reading. You were enjoying Tolkien as a teenager.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I guess I am. What's that word they say? Voracious reader.
Yeah.
This become like the a word that kind of means nothing nowadays because everyone is a voracious reader. We were talking about it recently. Consummate professional, voracious reader. These kind of words that we use. But I loved reading a lot as I was a kid, and I've lost it. And that's kind of like my whole sort of thing I'm trying to do now is to try get it back. But I read loads as a kid, and I just could gobble up books like most kids. I think most kids and most people remember the most time that they read was when they were children because I think your imagination can kind of just run away and you can just eat up books. But that kind of went into my early adulthood and then I honestly, and this is no, but I moved to America, and at the same time I moved to America, I got a smartphone, and I think those were kind of the two. That was the double whammy. Living in New York City, where like there's so much information everywhere, and then getting a smartphone, and there's like even my own bedroom. there's information everywhere, and that was the death of me in reading.
Yeah, it really is true. You're like fighting through all the words just to get to like maybe a thoughtfully arranged set of words, which aren't the most easily accessible by any means.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's a real
Yeah.
struggle that words are what are keeping us from better words.
Yeah.
And
They're
it's
the barriers.
the barriers. And yeah, most of the words being the ones that are trying to sell us things and get our consumer identity as quickly as possible. And you talking
Hmm.
about those words being overused, like voracious and consummate, voracious reader, consummate professional. It's like, yeah, all those bullshit, buzzy words that have sort of, well, they've taken good words and they've sort of neutralized them and they've flattened them out and diluted them. And so yeah, they like get past all of those. I mean, we read how many books a day just on our phones through travel walking through a city, you know? It's kind of curious
Hmm.
in that regard. But they're bad books in my opinion.
Yeah.
No, that's
They're a big pastiche of the ads and stuff. And it's this weird, horrible, complex arrangement of, things that are designed to make you feel bad so that you buy things.
right. And I'm just so glad books don't have ads in them yet like magazines do.
I have a Kindle. I don't know if that's like a toxic thing to say or a big clanger on this podcast, but I have one for when I moved over, I moved to a few different countries, and I the Kindle was a real solution to me bringing books around. And um and I remember like getting it. It was this early days model or whatever, and it used to have kind of nice inky designs of still life, and then somehow some upgrade happened to the damn thing, and then it's ads all the time, just
Mm.
ads on the Kindle. And I was like, God, and I don't use it anymore just because of that. I was like, this was supposed to be a space where, I don't want to be opening up like, page 5 of Ulysses, and then page 6, there's an advertisement for a new type of face cream. Like, come on, this is supposed to be a safe space.
Yeah, a safe space, and at least the physical copies of books have retained that so far. I mean, I always loved
Mhm.
at the end of a book when it like advertised the other books by that author or by that publisher. Even I thought
Mm.
that was like really cool, but it kept it in the family. It was about books.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So you've tossed the Kindle. Kindles are not taboo around here. We're pro
Okay.
e-reader, whatever you got to do to get to the books. Yeah, I
Hmm.
like same with audiobooks. I don't know if you listen to those, but those have gotten
Oh, I do.
really kind
Yeah.
of popular. But yeah, what have you been reading these days? Anything currently kind of in front of you? I mean,
Well,
you
yeah, I
you
mean,
did just
you
write a
can see in my
book too.
pile. I did, yeah. I have Sally's newest book, Intermezzo, which is you can even see with my bookmark in the camera, but
Yeah.
I'm on currently on page 95. So I got that a few days ago, which was this sort of fun thing because it was like it was like a new Tom Cruise movie was out or something like that. People were queuing up, but it was for books. And this is Dublin City. This is where she sets all of her books. And there were queues of, do you know who really seemed to love Sally Rooney is the international students who are going to Trinity. And you can tell that they've moved all the way from, Hong Kong and, maybe Los Angeles, and they've come all the way to Dublin just because of maybe reading these books and seeing these TV shows and stuff like that. But it's this real event now, the release of a Sally Rooney book. But I'm reading that right now, and I'm loving it. I think it's probably my favorite book of hers so far, and that's just 100 pages in, but it's brilliant. So I'm really loving Sally's books.
That's so cool. Yeah. So people are moving there because of the books. Yeah, that's such a thing, right? She like sparked
Hmm.
enough in their imaginations that they wanted to go involve themselves there. I mean, what
Yeah,
what
I
higher
mean,
compliment, really?
it's a compliment, but I mean, it's like I don't know what part of like the characters in her books are always depressed and heartbroken, and I don't know what part of like reading that would make me like I loved
Yeah,
the
but
Russian
it's
books when I was
between two
younger.
canals.
Yeah, that's true. You're like, I don't know, was it the donuts that you're one ate in conversations with friends? You're like, I got to try those donuts because, like, it's all these heartbroken men who aren't able to communicate themselves well, and these women who are questioning themselves in these weird age gap relationships. And it's like, what part of like some, French Parisian person who's living in France reads that and goes, God, wouldn't mind a little bit of that. I wouldn't mind, a man who doesn't know how to communicate.
A person from 18 to 25 years old.
Damn right,
That's
yeah.
the sweet spot for enduring romantic pain. What were you gonna say about the Russian novels?
Oh, which I used to read a lot of those, but there was no part of me that would say like, "Oh God, I gotta move to Russia." Like, The Brothers Karamazov. This is such an excellent book. Got to get me over there. I mean, it's not. I don't know. I don't understand the draw of like you can enjoy something but not want to move there. But I guess it just speaks to how believable her characters are and how much, even though they can kind of sometimes do awful things or act in silly ways uh you still really identify with them and really like them, and maybe that's why that there's something people read the books and go, God, these seem like people that I understand, and they're all very millennial people who are well-meaning but don't really know how to communicate. They're riddled with anxiety and sort of paralyzed by inability to act, and there's something that people maybe identify in that, and that's probably why people are coming to Trinity.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you kind of got me halfway there just based off that description. I'm like, yeah, I'm ready. All right, let's do this. It's like
Yeah,
Twilight without the vampires kind of vibe.
damn right. That's it.
Uh, but you moved to New York City. Was there any like media that influenced that in a
I
similar way, or?
One of the books I was gonna pick was actually Hemingway's book, A Movable Feast.
Hmm.
That was I read that, and I really really wanted to move to Paris because of that. I was very young. I was like 18, 19 or something like that. And I was in college and I read all these books of all the people who were in Paris in their 20s. And I kind of, it was a very romantic idea of going over there and having a great time and maybe being a writer, or even just sitting in the cafes where they ate and drank and did all that stuff. I did the drinking aspect of it, but I didn't do any of the writing, or, didn't have enough money to do anything. I was just drinking cans of, there was these cans of beer that you could buy in the shops that were called like Maximator in Amsterdam. And me and my friends who were also on Erasmus and were also Irish, because I just hung out with Irish people and sort of, Koreans and anyone who was international. And they were like, it was like a beer, but it was maybe like 12% beer. And we would just get three of those and just drink underneath Notre Dame and get like piss drunk,
Hmm.
and then cycle the city bikes that you got around there. And that was, I mean, I did that for a while, but I was like, this isn't really meeting up to my romantic vision of Paris.
Well,
And then yeah, sorry.
I mean, that's what they were doing too. It's just like 10 years later, the story does become romantic. Even what you just said was romantic to me in my
Yeah,
mind.
right.
I'm like, oh, doesn't that sound like a great way to toil away? And if by the way, if you're a person who reads A Movable Feast and doesn't want to go do that in Paris, you need to go get your pulse checked at the doctor right away, because
It's
I mean, you can
yeah.
like smell those streets in that book, and yeah, what a way. Okay, and so then you said you from there did you go to New York, and I mean,
I then I went back.
I'm
I went
waiting for you to be
back
like, I
to
saw the
Ireland.
movie Home Alone when I was a kid, and I just never shook
Yeah.
it.
I had no real it's very common for Irish people to move to New York. It's a sort of a common, well-traveled path. It's like when you live in Ireland, you leave. That's kind of just sort of the way it is when you're a young person.
Mm.
And it's almost like there's these sort of like escalators that you can get off, and one goes to New York, one goes to, the Bay Area, another goes off to Australia, and you be a builder or something like that. And there's just different escalators you can kind of get on. And I just had friends who had sort of jumped on the New York one before me, and I'd never had any ideas of going there, but they were there and they were like, "You gotta come over. It's the best. You'll make so much money." That's actually what they said to me. They were like, "You're gonna make so much money." And I was like, "Okay, I'll move to New York." And then the friends who had said that I would, come on, move over. I arrived there and I was sleeping on their couch, and they said, "Listen, like our visas got denied. We have to leave." So they left immediately. And then 2 weeks after I arrived, Trump was elected. And I was just like, oh my God, like what have I done? What have I done with my life?
Not an easy
But it was
time.
great.
Not an easy time to get a visa right at that moment.
Mm. Yeah. But
Yeah,
it was great. I love New York. Have you spent much time in New York?
yeah. I've spent I've had like uh several significant visits pretty much since I turned 30 years old. I hadn't spent much time, and yeah, it honestly feels like I have more friends in New York than I do in LA, and I never lived there, but yeah, I mean that's another one where you like read a book about 1970s squalor New York, and you're
Yeah.
at Patti Smith or whatever living at the Chelsea Hotel, and you're just like, if you're not being bitten by the bed bugs, I mean that idea just sounds so, yeah, romantic. But yeah,
Yeah.
I love New York City. I haven't been everywhere, but I do think it's like the greatest city in the world. If we're to
Hmm.
just like measure what a city is and what it offers you, and the life and the diversity and motion that it inspires.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I love New York. I go back there a lot. A lot of my close friends. I ended up living there for 2.5 years,
Oh,
and
nice.
I left. I I had to leave because of like visa reasons and things like that. And luckily it happened just before the pandemic. So I mean, it was good to get out of there before because I think being in New York for the pandemic would have been pretty brutal. But I mean, it's so funny the way it is just this great city. And I remember going over there and I'm like, they're always going on about it being like the greatest city on earth. And then you spend 2 years there, you're like, I mean, it's the greatest city on earth. There's no place like it. I remember I used to work in a bar down in the financial district where there's loads of Irish bars, and they had the Christmas tree down there, and there was this guy who like he was like a real sort of maybe like an Italian crooner kind of dude, and he was unveiling the Christmas tree, and they have a Christmas tree down there, and then they've got a Christmas tree in Union Square, 14th Street, Union Square, that area, and the Italian guy, it's like he was like, you know. I mean, we got New York, New York. What a city, We have a Christmas tree here. We got a Christmas tree. Name another town of the world that has two Christmas trees. Nobody. I was like, man, the small like a suburb of Dublin that I'm from has like five Christmas trees. Like that's not. This is the greatest city on earth, but that's not what makes it that.
It's like a car salesman selling the thing that's floating to get you to the
Yeah,
lot, not the actual car.
exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
dude, but
Mm.
that's so endearing. It's
It
kind of
is. Yeah, you love it.
Yeah, it kind of falls under that same New York charm. People just saying wild shit, wild shit.
Yeah.
um,
It's all PR. That's what someone said to me once in New York.
ah,
New York, it's all PR. I didn't know what it meant, but I was like, I like that line. I'll take that. It's all
okay,
PR.
it's all PR. Yeah, let's roll with that. I thought, yeah. Well, and you brought up the Sally Rooney book. I'd seen from your videos, comically made, like your book was published with the same publisher as
Hmm.
Sally Rooney, released around the same time. Um, I feel like it's a good segue to talk about your book because I'm curious about it. I want to know what's going on there. What's up with Country Fail?
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, it is published by Faber and Faber, who are like this very distinguished publisher. They've published, Joyce and Hemingway and or did they do sorry, Heaney, mostly like Irish British people, Heaney and Kavanagh and all these, very literary figures. And then obviously Sally Rooney done her most recent book with them. But yeah, I guess they're like really impressive literary people. And one of the editors there had seen this series of videos that I do where I sort of ramble around the countryside pointing at things and kind of describing them in slightly absurd ways to city people. I guess the audience is always, people who are from the city, but I think everyone tends to like, I've heard from people in the countryside, they kind of like this because it's a person in the city being an idiot in the countryside, which is something they enjoy. But yeah, Hannah Knowles, who's one of the people that the editors at Faber kind of just had, this is an idea for a book. I think it's a good book in it. And I was very, I don't know, scared, I guess, because like I said, I was like this person who went to Paris with the ideas of, being a writer. And I think being a writer is this thing that I always thought was, I guess if I had to, I never really, I fell into comedy in my career and stuff, but I think if I sort of in my imagining idealized version of myself always. I think like being a sort of a writer is something that I found the most romantic and cool, and that's what I wanted to be the most, maybe. And so when I was getting this chance to do it, I was kind of it was really encountering your kind of your own self and encountering like your own ability, like can I do this and all this kind of stuff. And also like a lot of comedians get asked to do gimmicky books. Like that's something that's quite common, especially if you're on the internet. I don't know if they have the same thing in America, but like it's quite common for a comedian to be asked to do some sort of gimmicky book about, for example, here it would be like, 50 things that Irish mothers say, or the things that happened in the 90s, and then just listing things that happened in the 90s. But, this comedian that from online wrote it. And I was also like, I really didn't want to write something like that. And so I really approached it as if it was like not a novel, but something with a bit of a narrative arc. And I wanted to try and write as beautifully as I could, or in a silly way as I could. And so it was a real, I don't know, I mean, you've written a book of poems, so maybe you had the same experience, but it was a real like, oh my God, I'm putting this out there as a book. How is it going to be received? And even sending it to like an editor from Faber saying like, these are my words. What do you think of my words? It was I found it really scary.
That's so interesting that like, yeah, your description is such a physical one, It's like the like processing the emotions of actually doing it is the first thing that comes to your mind when it's like, yeah, what's writing a book like? It's like, well, here's what it's like on a bodily level. Here's what it's like, in the turmoil of having to do it. Yeah, no, that's real. I've spent time working on like book pitches that took me 2 years that I did nothing with, and like it's a merry-go-round. And I went back to therapy because of it, and it was like most people don't want to keep digging that deep into their own matter. And
Yeah.
you can like trivialize it and be like, well, a real job, why don't you go work and it's like, no, I've worked real jobs too. This is depleting just in a very different, unique way. And it is something that ultimately, though, there's like this conversion to the suffering the writer goes through to the pleasure that the reader goes through if they feel like the writer was honest in their version of what they want to say. So it's cool hearing you talk to the struggle of that. And then you said you presented a narrative arc within it. This is like a memoir, though, right? Or
It's essentially what was kind of proposed was maybe like a series of short, I guess, essays. Each chapter would be an essay, and I take it a separate uh, sort of structure or idea or something from the countryside. It could be hedges, and then I'd write my sort of thing about hedges, and then stone walls, and it would sort of be something like that. But I just thought I'd like it to have something that would tie the reader along, because it's not the longest book in the world. Like it's about 20,000 words. So it's like I think people could zip through it, but it'd be nice if you could just sort of have something that knit it all together. So my idea was to kind of do a semi-autobiographical what is they call it, auto fiction? Is that the kind of popular
yeah,
phrase now?
yeah, I think so. Auto
A sort of
fiction.
bizarre version of auto fiction. And so it's me. I've had a sort of mental breakdown because I've been cancelled for I come out very strongly against fences all the time. It's kind of this, I call it this sort of the 19th century call. They want their unsustainable form of marking the boundaries between properties back. I kind of like make a lot of fun of it. But in the book, I've done a sort of bit of sponsored content with this. I think they're Industrial Farm Fences Limited, and it turns out that they're getting their fences from this Amazonian logging contractor, and then I get cancelled because of it, and so I lose all my followers, and I've gone to the countryside to recoup. But then I decide I've reinvented myself as a countryside influencer, and then the book kind of is my manifesto, because I figured out countryside living, and it's all about how the countryside is great and people from the city are fools, and I call them city dwellers, and then I run through and I take the reader on a little walk through the countryside, and then each chapter sort of goes through a different part of the countryside, and that's kind of how I did it.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, what a creative way in. And like, yeah, to get us to follow along your journey. I can't wait to read it, actually.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. We'll
This
see. I got some good reviews so far, specifically from my mother.
Oh, if you could
I did a
pass that
video
test.
recently where I compared, I did like comparison of me and Sally's books, except the only metric that really matters in Ireland, which is, what my mother thought. And she said mine was better than my mother. So I just then Sally's. So I don't know. Like that's that's a big thing here in Ireland. That means a lot.
Enough said. Yeah, seriously. You did it.
Yeah.
I come from like a family of false praise, so like anything you do, my family's just like it's genius, which is like equally dangerous. You're like heck yeah, I'm genius, and then you go out to the world, and it's like the world doesn't actually think that. But we were like, yeah, like almost
Yeah.
like maybe it's like the Southern California, like, hey, everything is PR, as they say in New York. Kind of in the family here. Sometimes it could be that way. I don't know. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's so
I
cool. Sorry, go ahead.
I had that too. No, I had that too. I had my mother's just that's the way, like I don't know if it's probably the same, but like Irish mothers are very like doting on their boys and tough on their girls. And that's just sort of how it is. So like you can't walk into the house without your mother telling you you're the most handsome boy in the world like 10 times. And then the sister walks in and she's like, "Oh, you're here, are you?" Or it's
Uh,
like, "Can you help Killian at the moment? He needs a bit of help," or something like that. My mum has three boys and one girl, and
oh,
my poor sister has to deal with a lot.
oh no. Is that like an internalized patriarchy thing or something? Because it happens
I
here
don't
too.
know. I don't know what happens with it. I don't know if you have siblings and it's the same model, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I do. I have a bunch of siblings, and it was just all chaos. It was up, it was down, you never knew what you were gonna get. But if you created something, chances are it was genius.
Maybe
Uh,
she was right.
yeah,
Maybe she was right.
maybe still waiting, still waiting. Um, she's like, "You're not making enough TikToks." I'm like, "Mom, I am almost 40 years old." Like, no one, no one, no one should hear their mother say that to them. But
Oh.
what about what other books did you have in mind that you were thinking of discussing? Because yeah, I'm
Yeah,
curious about your reading
uh,
life.
well, I thought I'd pick something based on Irish literature because that's such a big, rich thing that I think it's almost like I know you can like study it in some places and it's a very regarded type of literature and I think it's something we're very proud of and it's something that is very I guess there's sometimes if you look at sort of the English literature historically, there's like some sort of like sort of classist kind of element in it. Whereas in Ireland, I think like the cultural world here is quite accessible, which is a nice thing about it. Music and writing and literature, these are all quite accessible things. Like a lot of people in Ireland are writers, and a lot of people in Ireland are musicians and things like that. And that's a nice thing that we have. And I thought I'd pick, an Irish writer who maybe isn't the most famous, but a guy called Flan O'Brien. I don't know if you know Flan O'Brien.
No.
No, but he wrote a book called "At Swim Two Birds," which is this really beautiful piece of metafiction. I don't know when he wrote it, maybe like in the 40s or the 50s or something like that. It's a mad book. It's kind of seen as a great sort of postmodern novel, but like Flan O'Brien himself was this really interesting guy. He wrote under several different pseudonyms. He wrote in Irish. He was raised in an Irish speaking household, so he wrote in Irish language. He wrote in the English language, and he was a very, very talented writer. But he got a job. Like Ireland was very poor in that period, in sort of the 30s and the 40s and the 50s, and so he managed to get a job in the civil service, which is I don't know if there's like a similar kind of thing. But like getting a job in the civil service kind of means you're sorted. Like that's like the golden ticket. It's a steady pay. They can't fire you. You could walk up to your boss and like poke him in the belly and he can't fire you. And so it's the dream kind of job. And you don't get rid of a job if you have a civil service, especially if you're supporting a lot of people, which he was. But he just so happened to also be this incredibly talented writer. And so he wrote a few books. He wrote on Bale Bucht, I think is the name of one. He wrote in Irish, and then he wrote At Swim Two Birds, which is kind of seen as his great book. And then he wrote The Third Policeman, and none of them really got great. I don't know, they weren't very famous or something like that. I think he was quite unlucky. But like he's a truly like brilliant writer. So I'd Swim Two Birds. I guess I don't know. I had to talk about it a bit or something like that.
No, I mean that was great. I've never heard of him, but yeah, now I'm like making notes in my head. I'm also trying to polish my resume for the civil service, hoping maybe it's
Any
never
day soon.
yeah, never too late. But no, okay. And so, was he commonly read like in schools over there, or someone you had to kind of like find on your own, or have someone
I don't know
recommend to you?
how. I don't know how I found him. I think he's kind of like the sort of cool, maybe something hipstery about him, but like not that many people, even like still now, like he's known, but he's not like his real name was Brian O'Nolan, but
Hmm.
he wrote his books, some of his books under the name Flan O'Brien, and then he also wrote books under the name Miles na Gopalin. He actually was the leading. An article. What is it? When you write an article in a newspaper every week, what's that
Oh
called?
yeah, yeah, like a periodical or a
Something like
yeah,
that. He
weekly
had
column.
a column. Yeah, he was a columnist, and he was actually like one of the most famous columnists in the country. But he wrote everything under a pseudonym because he had this civil service job, so he really needed. He worked with like the Minister for Finance, organizing his week and things like that. So he wasn't able to reveal who he was. So he had about 15 different pseudonyms from how he wrote. So he never really attained any level of fame because he never really put a face behind the writer. But it's quite fun. It became a sort of it's a small place, so people eventually figured out who it was. And I think he lost his job in the civil service eventually because he would be writing a weekly column where he would just be rinsing people with this, I mean, really incredible language. And I think he made too much fun of a certain minister, and then they ended up firing him. I don't know if I have the quote because I just saw it recently, but I don't think I have it anywhere. But he like he goes into work and then the minister for finance or whatever his face is like reads the article and then realizes that this guy who called him some sort of slack-jawed, zombie toothed fool. He's like, this is my assistant. Are you joking me? So apparently he quit in like a flurry of fucks and just sort of went, fuck all you guys. And then he quit, was fired, sort of a vague thing. But his books are I mean, they're really mad. The At Swim Two Birds is basically about it starts with this young student who's studying literature, and he has this uncle who he lives with, who works for the Guinness Company, and that student spends a lot of his time just drinking stout and writing, and so he's writing a book which is about this guy who's writing a book about several other people. So it's incredibly layered. You have this student who's writing a book about this guy who's writing a book about several different characters, and within those different characters, you have sort of an ancient Irish story of this guy called Mad Sweeney, which is written in this incredible sort of old Irish sort of prose, which is really rich and kind of almost medieval or something like that. And then you have these two cowboy characters, because one of them is just like this sort of trash pulp kind of cowboy novel. And then basically like it's getting deeper and deeper into the layers of the narrative until the characters start rebelling against the person who's writing the story. And then they start, they steal the pen and start writing their own story. And then it all kind of blows up in flames and stuff like that. I think someone eventually burns the paper, but it's like a really, really, really good book, especially for a young student or a young kind of thinking person to read, because there's something kind of I think Dylan Thomas said it's a great book to give your sister if she's a dirty naughty girl or something like that. It's kind of, there's something a bit punky about it, even though it was written in, I don't know, the 40s or something like that.
Yeah, you had said postmodern at the beginning, and like that's like it sounds like the ultimate postmodern, kind of self-referential, like questioning its form as it's creating its form. And I mean, I'm listening to you tell about it, and I'm like, this is why I do this podcast, because I'm like, I never would have come across this book, and now I'm going to read it, because and not to say that I just do this podcast so people feed me my reading digestion, But like it's just exciting. I imagine other listeners are hearing that, going, "Oh, that sounds right up my alley. That sounds wild. That sounds like a." I don't want to use like like seven. What's that movie? Seven Psychopaths or something?
Oh yeah.
Isn't
Yeah.
that an Irish
Yeah, I
director
mean
too?
that's the McDonough, one of the
Mc,
McDonoughs, I think
okay.
Martin McDonough.
Yeah.
And his everything he does would be very influenced by the Irish literary tradition. It's almost, I mean, one of his kind of the criticisms of him is that he more writes with the Irish literature as the basis, not the reality of Ireland. And sometimes people criticize his work because of that.
Oh, that's
But he's
interesting.
yeah, I mean, yeah, he's great. I love his stuff.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Wow. That's so cool. Yeah, compelling stuff. I'm trying to even think of a comparable example, but that they turn on him and
What's
light the book on fire.
Confederate Dunces? It's kind of like in that, like I guess,
Oh,
like he's
Confederacy of Dunces.
yeah, you know the way he kind of writes and he has these little things and he's this writer who's kind of sits at home. And it's also funny in that way, you know, the way Confederacy of Dunces is very it's very funny. It's a really funny novel. It kind of has that humor to it. It's hilarious actually. So it's kind of I mean if you're a fan of that, you might be a fan of this.
Yeah, it's like that thinking man who's thinking so much that he's not actually doing anything, and like the kind of
Yeah.
slovenly behavior that follows. It's
Exactly.
that's
I've been there.
yeah, exactly. I'm like that's that's the memoir right there. Um, cool. Yeah, no, I love the sound of that. Yeah, so would you say a lot of the books you've read have been from Irish writers, or is there any kind of theme to your reading history? Or are you kind of all over the map?
I think I'm a bit all over the map. I do like American books. I like a lot of American novelists and things like that. And then I guess I love sort of also Victorian stuff. I love like I'm a big fan of Downton Abbey and those kind of things, and I love Sherlock Holmes and things. But honestly, like these are all I'm kind of talking a lot about books, bar Sally Rooney that I don't really read anymore. Like these are books that I read when I was younger, and I nowadays I think since the pandemic specifically, I kind of read with escapism in my mind, and I read a lot of Ian Rankin who does these kind of they're called tartan noir. They're novels set in Edinburgh that are very dark, Scandi noir. It's kind of like that, but set in Scotland.
Mm.
And and then I read a lot of Marion Keyes. I don't know if you know Marion Keyes. She's
Mm-mm.
a writer who writes. I mean, she's one of the biggest selling writers in the world, but she writes very funny books set in contemporary Ireland about people who have like alcoholism, eating disorders, these kinds of things. But they're very fun, nice. Um, they all have they're very easy to read, but they're actually about kind of tough subjects. So I read a lot of escapist kind of fun things that are enjoyable at the moment.
Yeah, no, that's the way. The enjoyment factor. I think too many people deprive themselves of that when they think about having to read. And it's like, no, you don't have to read. You want to read. And so what do you want to read? So I love that. And it's interesting you like those like like Sherlock Holmes you bring up, because thinking of you kind of meandering along the countryside, looking for clues in a sort of absurdist way, there is some detective work to what you're doing out there. And Sherlock Holmes is now past the copyright age, at least in America. I don't know what maybe the rules are different in every country, but you can make your own Sherlock Holmes movie if you want and call it Sherlock Holmes.
Oh God, I don't know if that's such a good thing. I did see that that happened with Peter Rabbit or one of those things, or with Winnie the Pooh. I think that happened to Winnie the Pooh, and they made some horrific kind of Winnie the Pooh film. It was like a horror movie with kind of BDSM and all this stuff.
Got
And then I
it.
know that was like on YouTube, and all these mothers were like, "Oh, there's a new Winnie the Pooh out. I'll rent it for my child." And then they stuck it on, and the kids are just like pointing at the screen, screaming, going, "Why is Winnie doing that to
Oh
Piglet?"
no.
Um,
Yeah, I
but
think
yeah,
I know what
like
you're
I don't
talking about.
know. It could be some good, could be some bad.
Yeah, this is a little unrelated, but I was at In-N-Out Burger the other night by UCLA, the college, and one of the colleges in LA, and there was a young person wearing a a mascot head and a tail, and it kind of had like some anime vibes, but it was like a furry wolf head. And it's so interesting because they were just sitting there still looking at their phone. And all their friends started sitting at the table around them with their burgers, and they were just kind of looking at their phone. And then this girl came up to them and was like, "Can I take a picture with you?" And they just kind of got up real casually, took the photo. The girl walked off with a smile on her face and left. And I was like, I don't know, is this like a thing now with young people? Has it made it to Dublin yet? I just haven't told anyone about this. And I
What
think
is it
the
like like with bunny ears or what's going on?
not bunny ears. It was a like a more kind of aggressive looking blue wolf head with blue wolf eyes. And or did it have eyes? Yeah, I think it did have eyes. And then maybe he saw through a different hole on it. But yeah, I don't know. I think the Winnie the Pooh gone wrong kind of like led me down this road of memory. And I'm
Is it
just
like a sort of like furries and then some sort of like new direction of the furries where it's like a more socially acceptable furry thing or something like that?
that's what I'm
Like
thinking.
I often find like we weren't very like accepting of the furry thing. I think we all just were like, okay, that's just a bunch of emo freaks kind of. That was kind of the I think that was the sort of culturally accepted way of treating furries. But maybe there's like a sort of new kind of I often think of goths and how I quite like goths and I see goths and I go, you know, especially if I see goths in their 30s and 40s and I'm like, that's great. That's great to see. Like you keep being a goth. That's wonderful. Whereas if I saw furries, I'd be like, ah, get away from me. But I don't know if I saw someone with like a cool wolf head, I'd be like, oh, you know what? That's kind of I'm all right with that.
Yeah, it's their form of expression. It's how they want to like leave the house into the world. I'm all right with it too. I do wonder if even me being perplexed by it is like going to get me canceled in 20 years when they look back on this and they're like, yeah, people in like the early 2020s, like they were intolerant of the mascot heads you wanted
This
to wear.
like is actually this actual bit is going to be clipped into the documentary. Like it's going to be like Josh Turek, just like this is such a problematic figure in like, for the early furries. Like he was very problematic. It was supposedly a book podcast, but all he would talk about was it was like a J.K. Rowling thing, but it was you know Josh and the furries. It was awful.
Yeah, yeah, no, I can feel it coming, but I'm willing. Look, like I said, I'm open to it too. It was the first time I'd encountered this sort of hybrid of what you're saying, like a furry, but everything else was in, regular clothing,
There you go again.
traditionally, traditionally attired hoodie. Um, yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. Yeah, real tangent. Well,
I know it was good.
were there any other books you wanted to get off your chest? I've really enjoyed what you've brought to us so far.
I did a little bit outside of the box here, but this book here, which is the other book that I own that I'm going to talk about, is actually it's called East by Mirasoda, and it's a cookbook. I don't know if that's have people done cookbooks
I
before.
don't
I
I
don't
don't
know if
think
I
they
was
have.
trying.
This might be our first cookbook, which I'm really pleased with. Yeah.
It's a beautiful cook. Mirasoda is this is a food writer for The Guardian, and she does like incredible recipes that are really amazing and very accessible, very easy to make. And I don't know, I was like for years and years I was just like Googling recipes or that's how I would cook. I would kind of like, oh, I'll find something online or find, and then you know you have to swipe through the person's life story before you get to the actual recipe. Even though nowadays most places have the jump to recipe click, which is wonderful.
Hmm.
But Mirazota was like this cookbook that kind of kicked off, and it was during the pandemic. And I don't know what it was like for you, but during lockdown here, like it was odd because we kind of I mean, the weather was very nice at the start, which is a rare thing over here. And it was like beautiful weather, and none of us were working, and we were getting 350 € a week, which is like just unbelievable, you know, especially if you were earning as little as I was earning and doing the job you weren't totally happy with. And so we ended up like getting this cookbook and like making beautiful like Eastern food that we'd never learned, and we'd probably like be reading it. This is like 5 hour long kind of meals we were sometimes making, and we were eating like kings and or I don't know, we were eating like grand viziers, and we were, drinking a lot, and I started making comedy around then, and it was just a really nice period of my life, even though obviously the world was in a really chaotic place and it was scary, and it was this new thing. But I don't know, I really associated with that really beautiful time where me and my friend Ty, who lives in New York, who's an Irish writer as well, we were living together, and we just were making loads of food out of this book. So I love it. I have it in my house, and sometimes I make things out of it still.
That's so cool. The sensory memories that come rushing back.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, it was a
Um,
similar thing here. Like if you had a job that wasn't what they deemed essential, yeah, there was like a pretty good weekly unemployment. And yeah, for creatives, that's all you want is like a window of time, even if you're panicking and in a bomb shelter or wherever you may be. Like you're like, great, a window of time, uninterrupted, to kind of like cycle through my emotional state and what I want to process and express. And yeah, so no, there were, and the sky got really clear here because no one was driving, and so like the sky looked really blue in Los Angeles, a deeper blue than we've seen here in a long time. So
that's
yeah,
amazing.
I know. So within that tragedy, there were these like quieter moments that you had kind of been questing for. Um, so yeah, a real mixed bag, that whole thing, depending on where you found yourself situated.
Oh, 100%, because it was like, I mean, this whole kind of machine that we're all on, and this system that's in place, like I mean, if you don't like it in any way, you're often thinking, well, there's no way of it falling down. It's there. It's this thing that's assembled and so slick that it can't break. The cogs are all stuck there. But for this weird moment, it completely broke down, and we had to learn how to live in totally new ways that, not even our grandparents or great grandparents were living in. It was kind of like a real jolt. And there's like, it's very interesting. And there was some beauty, and a kind of a weight was lifted off a lot of people, even obviously terrible time, awful, awful, awful. But like, it did make you realize things, like what kind of work is essential is a big thing, but also like, maybe I don't mind not having to meet up with all these people and have to go to work every day and all this kind of stuff. Maybe I prefer just baking bread and making recipes from this book and gardening. Like that's actually maybe a life that I quite like, and maybe it's okay that that's just my life.
Yes, people sought creative outlets to stay sane, and it's like, okay, if that's the first thing you seek during this moment when
Yeah,
everything slows down, maybe those are the important things, right? And
exactly.
yeah, no, that really kind of brings up memories. And then speaking to In-N-Out Burger, the lines to the drive-through were really long, and but you had time to wait, so you could just
Yeah.
sit there and yeah, I wasn't busting out the cookbook. I was eating fast food, like like I wanted to do
But I
all that
mean,
time.
if you're talking about America's culturally important, that was almost like going to church for you,
That's
surely,
that's
out
that's
there
right.
in LA.
Just there truly was a real comfort to the flow of sitting in a drive-through, and In-N-Out is like the favored fresh fast food out here in LA that a lot of people have opinions about.
What is In-N-Out Burger? What is it?
So it's
'Cause I've
like
never heard of
it's
it.
a the best way that I describe it is it's the best fast food. Some people will go, "Oh, the burger here's better." It's like, "Okay, but that place is not fast food. It's never
Hmm.
frozen, it's fresh, a very formatted menu that hasn't changed in 50 years, and it tastes good." And if you grew up in LA or the West Coast, because it's only been on the West Coast, there's a sentimental quality to it, and people of every demographic go there. Like you'll see a celebrity at In-N-Out. That's like where they go after the Academy Awards in their limousines.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
you'll see celebrities there, but you'll also see people on the opposite end of the capitalist equation, who aren't doing as well. And yeah, it's affordable, and if you're a vegetarian, you can get grilled cheese there, and it's really good grilled cheese too. So
Okay.
yeah.
All right. I can't wait. I'll get over to LA sometime soon, and I'll have a nice grilled cheese and In-N-Out burger.
Oh yeah, that's what a lot of people
And
do when they
hopefully
land.
I'll bump into some celebrity and I'll try shove a script in his face and go, yeah, I got a great idea. Me and my friend Josh wrote it about it. Okay, it's basically it's about the furry community and how they're not appreciated. And
Sherlock Holmes meets Winnie the Pooh meets a renegade vigilante furry who's addicted to technology.
Yeah,
Will he solve
we'll
the
see.
case or will he stare at his cell phone for the next 7 hours? No, I love that. Well, if you come to LA, your in and out is on me, so hit me up if you do.
Oh, amazing.
But yeah, it's been such a pleasure getting to meet you, albeit digitally, and having you on and hearing about your book and the books that have come across your way that you felt like discussing. And yeah, I've really appreciated talking to you.
What a pleasure to meet the man that looks like me, in the most beautiful compliment I've ever got. And yeah, it's been great meeting you. And I can't wait. I love the idea that both the books we've written are gonna pass each other in a plane, and one's gonna land in Dublin and one's gonna land in California. My book might make it on the big screen.
I love that. Yeah, no, that's the thrill. You put something out into the physical realm, and now that book will be here before probably even you get over here. So, and likewise.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Do you know what I promise? I'm gonna take your book of poems. I'm gonna go to Trinity. I'll get a cup of coffee and I'll read it in those annaled halls of Trinity. I promise.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm too old to emulate the Sally Rooney character. So if my poetry book can, and yeah, okay, I guess I got to take your book to In-N-Out Burger before you get here. Warm it up. Which I have no problem going twice in the name of Killian Sundermann. It's a pleasure.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah,
thanks for having me.
Yeah, real joy. And thanks for coming on. And yeah, let's talk soon. And yeah, go check out everything Killian does because he's a true pleasure.
Thanks so much for having me, man.
All right. You be well. And thank you for listening to another episode of Turek Books. Happy reading out there. From LA to Dublin. Thank you for listening to another episode of Turek Books. Be sure to like, subscribe, thumbs up, any kind of thing that could help us get listened to or watched by more people. We really appreciate